Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. The U.S. is making inroads with Afghanistan. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today announced an upcoming peace deal with the Taliban. President Trump prepares for a trip to India while planning a multi-step trade deal. Trouble persists for some Americans who were aboard the Diamond Princess cruise ship even after they were evacuated and taken back to the U.S. 4 of them have been found to have the coronavirus. And the U.S. Treasury says it still expects China to honor the recently signed trade deal, despite the coronavirus update dragging down the country's economy. But the department acknowledges it could slow things down. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today announced the latest developments on U.S. peace talks with Afghanistan. In a statement, he described the upcoming signing of a peace deal.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that the U.S. is making significant inroads towards peace in Afghanistan. He says the U.S. has been in talks with the Taliban about reducing violence across the country. The purpose? To reduce the presence of U.S. troops in Afghanistan and to make sure the country no longer harbors terrorists who seek to threaten the United States. Secretary Pompeo sent out a tweet the same day as the announcement, saying, "After decades of conflict, we have come to an understanding with the Taliban on a significant reduction in violence across Afghanistan." He said it was an important step on a long road to peace and called on all Afghans to seize this opportunity. The U.S. expects to sign an official agreement with the Taliban on February 29th. Then competing forces within Afghanistan are expected to sign a ceasefire so that Afghanistan can move forward as a nation. Reducing U.S. troops in Afghanistan was one of President Trump's campaign promises. Secretary Pompeo said that peace was close once before, but said the Taliban at that time did not, quote, demonstrate either their will or capacity, or both, to deliver on a reduction in violence.
Soldiers are returning home after about 3,000 troops from a U.S. Army Rapid Response Force were deployed to the Middle East nearly 2 months ago amid tensions with Iran.
Nearly 800 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division arrived at Fort Bragg in North Carolina on Thursday, marking their return from the Middle East. On New Year's Eve, the Pentagon confirmed that some 750 soldiers were being immediately deployed to Kuwait after an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq. The attack came amid tensions with Iran and its proxies in the region. This was in addition to the Marines who were already on location protecting embassy personnel, the Pentagon said at the time. The 82nd Airborne Division said upon the paratroopers' return that the deployment was the most significant no-notice deployment of military forces in more than 30 years. The statement explained that about 2,000 members of the 1st Brigade Combat Team are still posted in the region for any missions deemed necessary. It remains unclear when they will return home.
President Trump's first official visit to India is set for Monday, where he hopes to strengthen the U.S.-Indian strategic relationship.
President Trump heads to India for his first official trip on Monday. Negotiators have been trying for weeks to put together a limited trade deal giving the U.S. greater access to India's dairy and poultry markets and lowering tariffs on other products. The president will meet with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He said on Thursday he will only make deals that put America first and that they might not make a deal until after the November election.
Well, we can have a trade deal with India, but I'm really saving the big deal for later on. We're doing a very big trade deal with India.
A planned trip to India by the U.S. Trade Representative was canceled last week. Negotiations between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi began over a year ago. Talks aim to restore some U.S. trade preferences for India and improve access to India for some U.S. agricultural products and medical devices. The U.S. is India's second largest trade partner after China. In New Delhi, an Indian Foreign Ministry spokesman said India will not rush into a trade deal with the U.S. and that there needed to be a balanced outcome. Despite disagreements over trade, the two leaders appeared to get on well. President Trump said he likes Prime Minister Modi a lot. Prime Minister Modi is making various preparations for President Trump's visit next week. The reception will take place in Modi's western home state of Gujarat in a cricket stadium. A U.S. energy firm is set to sign a memorandum of understanding to supply 6 nuclear reactors to an Indian state-run company next week. Experts say this will be a major step forward for both countries. The deal would help to revitalize a historic nuclear deal signed by India and the U.S. in the mid-2000s.
Roger Stone, a longtime showman, political strategist, and friend of President Trump's, has been sentenced to 40 months in prison. This not long after the president announced that he has no plans to pardon him. But Trump has hinted this could change in the future.
A federal judge sentenced President Donald Trump's longtime advisor Roger Stone to 3 years and 4 months in prison on Thursday. The judge said Stone's lies to lawmakers who were investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election amounted to a threat to American democracy. The 67-year-old was charged with 7 counts of lying to Congress, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering, and was convicted of all of them on November 15th. Stone has been a friend and advisor to the president for decades, but Trump announced in Las Vegas that he doesn't plan to pardon him for now.
I want the process to play out. I think that's the best thing to do.
But the president didn't rule out an eventual pardon or commutation.
I'd love to see Roger exonerated, and I'd love to see it happen, because I personally think he was treated very unfairly.
He says Stone's jury included an anti-Trump activist and that Stone has a very good chance of exoneration.
The government's annual economic report includes some statistics on Barack Obama's economic performance compared to President Trump's. Trump says his pro-growth policies has benefited Americans overall, especially the disadvantaged.
President Trump is pitching his economic successes against Barack Obama in the 2020 economic report released today. The report disputes the claim that Trump's achievements are merely a result of inheriting an improving economy under Obama. Obama's presidency began just as the U.S. was coming out of a deep recession in 2008. Given this timing, it's natural the economy would improve under his presidency. At the time, economists predicted that this economic expansion would naturally slow down around 2016. But in fact, expansion accelerated under Trump. Trump says this isn't a coincidence. He credits the success to his tax cuts, cutting red tape for businesses, becoming less reliant on other countries for energy, and negotiating fairer trade deals with other nations. The report says disadvantaged Americans have benefited more under Trump than under Obama. The wealth of the lower half has increased 15.2% under Trump versus 4.1% under Obama. Wages for the bottom 10% of earners have grown 4.9% under Trump versus 1.9% under Obama. For African Americans, wages have increased 3.8% under Trump versus 1.8% under Obama. The report says eliminating regulations on energy production and increasing production of shale gas has saved an average family of 4 $2,500 annually. Trump says, although the American economy is stronger than ever, his administration's work is not done yet.
And the U.S. today saying it expects China to honor their trade deal despite the virus outbreak. Meanwhile, China has said goods coming in and out this month will be hit, but they expect to open factories back up by the end of February.
The coronavirus has caused businesses to shutter, and some analysts expect China's growth to drop this first quarter but recover by the second. However, on Friday, the U.S. Treasury said it's too early to speculate and that it still expects China to honor its trade agreement over a period of time. Under the deal, China pledged to buy an additional $77 billion worth of goods in 2020 and $123 billion by 2021. But their commitment is one thing. The International Monetary Fund said this viral outbreak could drag down the global economy if it manages to spread to other countries. So to go over the virus's potential impacts, the U.S. Treasury Secretary will meet with senior finance officials and central bankers from G20 nations this weekend. However, China said this week that it won't send senior officials to the meeting because of the outbreak. The U.S. said lower-level officials will represent China instead.
A U.S. Defense Secretary official says China is engaging in steady-state competition with the U.S. That means China's economic and military projections are challenging the U.S. on a global scale without armed or violent conflict. The Defense Secretary says China's leader is telling his army to prepare for war.
Thank you for being here.
While discussing China's military projections, a U.S. Secretary of Defense on China suggested the Department of Defense should reorient its strategic competition with China. A specialist on U.S.-Asia issues pointed out China's military and economic operations, which present a challenge for the U.S.
You talked at some length about and responded in questions to the steady state competition that we're in. And using your own term, I'd like to foot stomp this as well. I think the challenge is a daily one. It's urgent, it's multidimensional.
The defense secretary said the U.S. must not wait and try to be prepared for a violent conflict with China, but must be aware that the conflict has already started as a result of China's peacetime preparations for war.
What Xi Jinping has told to his own PLA, which is to concentrate on preparations for war, which is steady state, preparations, right? Setting conditions, being prepared so that if the time comes, is that he can employ them as needed.
The U.S.-China Security Review Commissioner noted the U.S. needs allies in order to confront China diplomatically and politically.
There are 5 major allies in the Pacific: Japan, Korea, Australia, Thailand, and the Philippines, all have as their number one trading partner China.
The defense secretary said while U.S. alliances with countries in the Indo-Pacific are robust, using Chinese technology may present a security risk.
We have to be very clear-eyed that these countries are becoming under increasing pressure from multiple different lanes: diplomatic and economic pressure, political coercion.
Another commissioner pointed out China doesn't have a long history of allied relationships with meaningful countries that the U.S. has.
I mean, their allied relationship seems to be more driven by coercion and fear than by common interest.
But the defense secretary said China rejects alliance systems. He explained that instead, it adopts strategic partnerships while quadrupling its Marine Corps and developing long-range tools like
long-range air forces and other kind of ballistic missiles and hypersonic missile, long-range missile capacities, and then certainly cyber and space capacities, which are not dependent upon any sovereign issues at times.
According to the defense secretary, China's ability to support infrastructure projects like One Belt, One Road creates competition for the U.S. outside of a hot warfare scenario.
And an update on the Diamond Princess cruise ship's passengers. Following their evacuation last weekend, 4 more Americans have tested positive for the novel coronavirus. They are now on their way to the hospital for treatment.
According to the Department of Health and Human Services, another 4 Americans released from the Diamond Princess cruise ship have tested positive for the coronavirus. They were flown back to the U.S. over the weekend. Officials said on Thursday that the 4 passengers are now headed to a hospital in Spokane, Washington for treatment. This after being in quarantine with other American evacuees at Travis Air Force Base in California. When it docked in Japan, the Diamond Princess was put under quarantine, but more than 600 passengers and crew have been infected with the virus, which causes flu-like illness and can lead to pneumonia. Over 300 of the ship's passengers have been flown home on U.S. chartered airplanes. Most were placed in other military bases in California and Texas, while 13 high-risk passengers were transported to a specialist hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. 2 of them have now been cleared, but the other 11 are infected. Centers for Disease Control say test results from people who were on the Diamond Princess continue to trickle in from Japan, even after they returned to the United States.
Scuffles broke out between police and residents of a village in central Ukraine as they protested the arrival of a plane carrying evacuees from China's Hubei province. The protesters fear they could be infected with the coronavirus, despite authorities saying there's no danger.
Ukrainian residents clashed with police on Thursday, protesting against evacuees from China quarantined over the coronavirus from entering their town. Locals in Novi Sanzuri burned tires and hurled objects at buses carrying evacuees flown in from Hubei province, the center of the outbreak. They feared becoming infected with the virus despite authorities repeatedly insisting there was no danger. Protesters blocked a bridge to stop evacuees from entering, while hundreds of helmeted police and an armored military vehicle tried to keep order during the day-long standoff. Ukraine has no confirmed cases of coronavirus, and authorities say all passengers were twice screened before being allowed to enter. Ukraine has recently grappled with a measles epidemic, and the country's weak healthcare system and corruption have made mistrust of authority widespread.
Up next, South Korea's coronavirus infection cases doubled again this Friday. Most cases are linked to a church.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
South Korea's coronavirus cases doubled again today. That brings the total to over 200 cases.
South Korea on Friday reported the country's second death and 100 new coronavirus cases. Most of the cases are from the city of Daegu, where an infected elderly woman attended church services. Health authorities described the services as super-spreading events.
We are promptly investigating all people who came in contact with the confirmed patient, and we are planning to conduct effective measures such as investigating all the churchgoers to detect those with symptoms in their early stages.
The news worries residents in Seoul, some of whom are saying they want the government to respond with proper measures to contain the virus.
I hope response measures are carried out quickly. In the past, our government was late in responding to some situations, but I hope they show a more reliable side this time.
Daegu is a city of 2.5 million people. The infected person is a 61-year-old woman known as Patient 31. After the news broke, the local mayor said they are in an unprecedented crisis and asked residents to stay indoors to prevent further spread. The shopping malls and cinemas are deserted as people are holed up indoors.
Terrible news. Hopefully the outbreak in South Korea can be contained soon. And in related news, a senior economic policy official in China says many businesses in China could go bankrupt if the coronavirus outbreak cannot be controlled by the end of this month.
In a recent economic forum, Chinese politician and economist Liu Shijin said the consequence of the virus outbreak could be dire for China's economy, especially if things can't calm down by the end of this month. He said the degree of impact on the economy depends on how long the outbreak lasts. If Chinese authorities had the disease under control by January, then only businesses in the service sector like restaurants, hospitality, and transportation would see the impact. But since the outbreak hasn't slowed, China is already seeing more industries start to suffer, including construction and agriculture. Liu said if the outbreak taps into March, it would hurt the bones and sinews of China's economy. Businesses won't be able to fulfill their contracts or pay employees' salaries. Their cash flow may not be sustainable, and many could go out of business. He suggested that the officials try to strike a balance between disease control measures and allowing business operations. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, London courts prepare to decide whether WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will be extradited to the U.S. More on the case when we return.
Absolutely the #1 show on the planet.
I love it.
Breathtaking.
Incredible.
Awesome.
Very exciting.
Mesmerizing. Really enjoyed it.
It makes you feel alive.
Absolutely flawless.
I laughed, I cried. Colorful and vibrant and joyous.
The dancers, you guys are amazing.
They can just fly. Gravity does not apply to them.
Oh my gosh, I was so intrigued by this.
I'd get lost in the music and I'd get lost in what I'm seeing on stage.
it's a very eye-opening experience.
We came for her birthday.
Great experience, well worth it.
Even though it's been going for about 10 years, every year it's a completely different show.
I know this sold out very, very quickly, and I can see why now.
I think I've not seen something like this ever before.
I would recommend it to everybody.
I recommend it to everyone.
Controversy is brewing over the way schools teach American history. Two groups are working to change the way the story of American slavery is taught in the classroom. Changing it seems like a near impossible task, but despite its challenges, people are trying to do it.
The 1619 Project, spearheaded by the New York Times, was launched last August. It aims to redefine America's founding year to 1619 and to change the way students are learning about slavery's impact on our country. Project editor Nicole Hannah-Jones said in an interview with PBS that the group wants to change the American thinking that slavery is just a problem of the past that's been resolved. On the other hand, a separate initiative, called 1776, launched shortly after the 1619 Project. In an interview with the Epoch Times program, American Thought Leaders, the founder of 1776 shared their mission.
So 1776, we are challenging it by saying, no, we think there should be a more balanced understanding of this great nation of ours.
He says he aims to implement a curriculum that tells the stories of those who broke through slavery to spark resilience in the hearts of young people.
If blacks achieved this level of self-sufficiency and independence because of the strong moral code of conduct, how can we learn from those experiences? So it's very uplifting, it's aspirational, it's inspirational, and that's what the American public is looking for. We want answers.
The 1776 group is currently working to construct curriculum that does just that. Meanwhile, the 1619 Project has already made its way into over 3,000 schools. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News, New York.
The extradition hearing for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is due to start at a London court on Monday. It could result in his being extradited to the U.S. over charges relating to one of the largest ever leaks of U.S. classified documents. Jane Wirrell reports from London.
Julian Assange has been held in this high-security prison where he awaits his extradition hearing in London. The Australian WikiLeaks founder is charged with espionage and computer hacking in the U.S. If found guilty in the U.S., he could face 175 years behind bars. Contesting Assange's U.S. extradition is his lawyer, Jennifer Robinson.
You can expect to hear arguments about the political nature of the offence for which he's been charged. You can also expect to hear concern being raised about the free speech issues.
Assange came under scrutiny in 2010 after hundreds of thousands of classified American documents were published on the WikiLeaks website. The same year, Swedish prosecutors issued an arrest warrant for Assange over allegations of serious sexual assault, which he denied. His extradition to Sweden was granted by the UK Supreme Court in 2012. Desperate to avoid extradition, Assange sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. In 2015, Swedish prosecutors dropped the molestation investigation. The rape allegation was dropped in 2017. In April 2019, UK police dragged Assange out of the embassy after Ecuador withdrew his asylum status. He was jailed in London for skipping bail. In May 2019, the U.S. filed 17 new charges against Assange and submitted a formal extradition request a month later. Sweden reopened the investigation, but it was later dropped. His supporters have expressed concern for his health. WikiLeaks editor-in-chief said this week Assange is in better condition and out of isolation after pressure from his legal team, the public, and inmates.
I saw him about 10 days ago. He has improved.
Their first week of legal arguments are due to start on Monday and will pick up again in May for 3 weeks, with the losing side likely to appeal. Jane Wirrell, NTD News, London.
And still to come, ancient traditions, juniper flowers, and alcohol-free gin. After the break, we enter the world of a modern-day druid.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
In Celtic tradition, it was believed plant gatherers known as druids could communicate with nature. Our France correspondent, David Vives, followed one of them in the mountains for a winter harvest.
In European Celtic civilization, plants were regarded as sacred and used in medicine. It was believed gatherers known as druids could communicate with them. 3,000 years have passed since the Celts, but in Jura, France, Stéphane Myers is preserving their tradition.
Wild plants grow in specific places and they have their own reasons to be here.
The juniper flower, commonly used in gin, is gathered in winter. Before setting out, Meyer inspects his crew.
Here's Benz, Luma, Happy, and Choco. Ready to get some juniper. Here we go.
He says gatherers have a positive impact on nature. What's important, though, is to never collect more than you need. Meyer carefully chooses where to gather, then returns again after 5 years. This break allows the plants time to regrow, but finding the spots again can take some time.
Here, we found it.
Meyer's customers include top French chefs. They use wild plants to give their meals a unique flavor. His impatient crew greets Meyer after a successful harvest.
You can use juniper to smoke meat or fish. It has a broad range of aromas. It smells like pepper. There are different berries and not all have the same maturity, which result in a very different taste for each branch.
In France, wines have their own marker or cru. Cru is an indicator of where a wine was produced and its quality. Stéphane now uses this term with plants.
This is a particular approach. For each mountain here, I select some plants growing on it. I distill the roots, seeds and flowers on these plants and create a recipe. This is what we call a cru.
Once dried out, some of the plants will be used to create a liquor. Meyer is using this year's juniper flower to create a new recipe, an alcohol-free gin. Others that will be cooked are sold as a bouquet. But whether in a bottle or in a bouquet, the Druid's touch means this tradition will live on for another season.
So McDonald's is turning food into fumes. Soon you'll be able to experience the scent of melted cheese, grilled hamburger, and baked bread with just the light of a match. McDonald's didn't bottle the smell of its iconic Quarter Pounder with cheese. It put it in a candle. Well, 6 candles to be exact. The Quarter Pounder scented pack features bun, ketchup, pickle, cheese, onion, and beef votives. You can burn them individually or all at once for the whole meal aroma. The candles aren't for sale yet, but you can check them out on McDonald's merch website. And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.